A lobby that doesn't see the automatic doors of Ridgeway Medical Center parted with a polite whisper, letting in a draft of cold morning air and one very unassuming man. It was 7:43 a.m., and the hospital lobby buzzed with the usual quiet chaos. Clicking heels, hurried nurses, exhausted interns, and patients gripping clipboards like they were lifelines. Reception phones rang like distant alarm bells. The coffee machine hissed aggressively in a corner, producing cups of something legally called coffee, but spiritually closer to regret. Nobody noticed the man walking in. Why would they? His shoes were plain. His coat was the kind your uncle from the countryside might wear on Sundays. He had no wristwatch, no visible brand labels, no entourage. He wasn't screaming for attention. He was just present. He walked slowly. Carefully, his left arm looped around the frail shoulders of an elderly woman who leaned on him like he was the last familiar thing in a world she no longer recognized. Her breathing was shallow, her steps tentative, but she clung to him with quiet trust. A security guard eyed him briefly, then looked away bored. An administrator walked past him without acknowledgement. Even the receptionist looked up only long enough to say, "Do you have an appointment?" before answering her desk phone with a chirpy, "Good morning. Ridgeway Medical, how can I help?" "You?" The man didn't seem bothered. He simply nodded, helped the woman sit down gently in the nearest waiting chair, then stood beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the space like someone studying a map made of people. His name was Keanu Reeves, and no one in the building knew he owned it. Scene 2. The man in the corner. Keanu didn't fit in Ridgeway Medical. That was part of the point. The hospital, gleaming and modern, stood as a proud jewel of the city's elite healthcare system. It boasted luxury private rooms, a rooftop garden for wellness, and a waiting area with furniture more expensive than some small cars. It also had an unwritten policy. If you didn't look like you belonged, people treated you like you didn't. He knew. He'd built it that way once, but that was before. Now he came not as a CEO, not as the reclusive philanthropist whispered about in tech circles. He came as a test. A secret audit of the very thing he'd created. The woman beside him, Mrs. Edna Forrester, had been more than a caretaker during his difficult youth. She was the first person to ever tell him he was enough, back when the world had been screaming the opposite. Now her lungs were failing her, and so far, so was the system. They'd been sent here for priority evaluation due to Keanu's generous donations. He'd intentionally made the appointment under her name alone. No special flags, no notes, no red carpet. Just like anyone else. And just like anyone else who didn't look like they belonged, they were being ignored. Scene 3. Judged in a glance. "Sir," came a sharp voice. "You can't stand there. You're blocking the desk." A woman in a pale blue blazer and tight bun glared at him like he just coughed on her credit score. Keanu blinked. "I'm just standing by my... We have a process, sir. If you're accompanying a patient, you may wait over there." She gestured to a cluster of plastic chairs in the far corner, near the vending machines and the perpetually broken water fountain. Keanu offered a half smile. "She has trouble breathing. Moving again might then have her wait alone." "Will call her." Keanu didn't argue. He helped Edna stand, moved her slowly, painfully, to the plastic seats. The woman at the desk made no effort to assist. Just pursed her lips like she was chewing on a lemon made of policies. Scene 4. Enter the doctor. 10 minutes later, a door opened near the elevators and out walked Dr. Raymond Hawley, a man whose confidence was so large it needed its own lab coat. He was in his early 40s, tall, expensively tan, with a face that suggested he paid more for moisturizer than Keanu had spent on his whole wardrobe. His stethoscope was gold-trimmed. His name tag gleamed like a trophy. He walked with the swagger of someone who believed the hospital existed to orbit him, A nurse hurried beside him, trying to keep pace. "Yes, doctor, but the patient in 304 is... Tell 304 to hold it in." Hollis snapped, checking his Rolex. "I have more important things to do. Like not getting sued." He reached the main desk, glanced at the day's list, and frowned. Who is Edna Forrester? Why is she scheduled for priority imaging? The woman in the blue blazer pointed vaguely. She's with that man in the brown coat. Dr. Hawley turned, squinted at the corner, and raised a brow. That guy? The nurse beside him winced. Scene 5. Cold words, warmer eyes, Dr. Hawley strode over like he was about to inspect something beneath him. You're Forrester's son? Kean stood slowly. No, friend. She's having trouble breathing. She needs to wait her turn, Hawley interrupted. This hospital doesn't move on sympathy, it moves on schedule. Kean nodded slightly. Of course. But I think if you listen to her chest, you'll... Are you a doctor? Hawley snapped. No. Then don't diagnose. We'll call her when it's her turn. And next time... He looked Kean up and down like he was a stain on a silk sheet. Try not to make a scene. Kean said nothing. Edna looked up at him, confused and frightened. He gave her a soft smile. Don't worry, we'll get through this. Dr. Hawley scoffed. You people always say that. You people? Kean asked mildly. Hawley grinned without humor. I mean the kind who think kindness gets you health care. He turned on his heel, muttering, This hospital is for people who matter. The boy who knew too much and owned nothing. Before the silence, the stillness, the leather chairs and boardroom votes, there was a boy, 16 years old, a hoodie that didn't fit, a mattress that squeaked with every sigh, and a foster home where breakfast came with side dishes of second-hand judgment. Kean Ross wasn't born into the world with a silver spoon. He got a rusty fork and made it work. His parents? Names and files. His belongings? Fit in a duffel bag in a folder labeled Ward of the State. His social worker said, You're not dumb, just ... invisible. She meant it kindly. He took it literally. It was in that invisible space, in between part-time shifts and school that didn't care, that Kean found his obsession. Information. Not the textbook kind. No, the internet. He'd sneak into the public library every evening and glue himself to a dusty old Dell computer. While others scrolled memes, Kean devoured free online lectures from MIT like they were survival rations. He taught himself Python before he had a proper phone. He debugged strangers' code for lunch money. He read health policy, hospital billing, AI and diagnostics, everything, because he'd seen what not having answers looked like. He had the scars to prove it. Scene 2, first job. Last stop. Kean's first job was ... glamorous. If you consider scrubbing toilets in a dentist's office glamorous. He worked at night, mopped floors that bled with footprints from people who never noticed the kid in the uniform. But he noticed them. One day, during a particularly slow shift, Kean found an unlocked office computer. Not to snoop, just to see. The dental software? Obsolete. The payment system? Clunky and predatory. He emailed the dentist anonymously with a 3-slide proposal. The next day, he was fired. 2 months later, that same dentist launched a patient-friendly platform that looked eerily similar to Kean's idea. Kean didn't cry about it. He just learned a lesson. Keep building. But build quietly. Scene 3, the spark. Enter Everett Lynn. It wasn't until he met Everett Lynn, a retired tech entrepreneur, that things shifted. It happened by accident. Literally. Kean had picked up a gig delivering herbal teas. Long story, don't ask. He was dropping off a package at an upscale apartment when he saw an elderly man struggling with a fallen walking stick. Kean helped. Carried groceries. Rebooted the man's Wi-Fi. and because fate has a weird sense of humor, Everett Lynn, who had once sold his software firm for $100 million, invited the shy delivery kid to stay for tea. Tea became talk, talk became tutoring, and tutoring became trust. You don't just see code, Everett once said. You see people inside it. That's rare. With Everett's mentorship and modest backing, Keanu built his first startup, MedMirror, a platform that used AI to simplify medical bills and flag unethical practices. It exploded. Quietly. Keanu refused all interviews. Didn't even put his photo on the site. Let the work speak, he'd say. When he sold MedMirror 3 years later, he was 23 and anonymously wealthy. Scene 4. The hidden hand, but wealth wasn't the goal. Access was. Fairness was. Keanu didn't want to buy islands. He wanted to fix the land everyone forgot. Hospitals, he learned, were the root of so many stories. Triumph and tragedy. Lifesavers. And heartbreakers. He'd seen people like Edna, his former caretaker, turned away because they couldn't afford urgent consultation fees. So, he created the Ross Trust, a discreet investment firm with a single directive. Own. Quietly. Influence loudly. Uplift silently. Under this trust, he acquired stakes in healthcare tech, diagnostic labs, and finally, Ridgeway Medical Center. No one knew. Not even the board. His identity was buried beneath layers of entities. To the world, he was just another silent partner. But he watched. Oh, he watched. He didn't want people to treat others kindly because he told them to. He wanted to know if the culture of compassion stood on its own legs. So he became just another man. In another waiting room, Scene 5, present day. Watching the storm back in the present, Keanu sat in the plastic chair beside Edna. She was asleep now, her breath ragged but steady. He stared at the same cold walls he helped fund. He noticed the nurse who slipped water to a scared teen without charging for it. He noticed the billing clerk who barked at a woman for asking about insurance. Coverage. He noticed everything. And in his notebook, the little one with the cracked leather cover, he jotted it all down. Room 4B, expired syringes. Lobby staff, no triage training. Nurse Amara, showed compassion, noted for commendation. Dr. Hawley, discussed ego more than patient symptoms. It wasn't revenge. It was documentation. A prelude to change. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. Not the kind of phone someone in a thrift store coat should own. A message blinked onto the screen. Sir, Phase 2 is ready. Confirm? Ava, his assistant. The only person who knew the full plan. Keanu looked around once more. Then at Edna. He didn't confirm yet, but he smiled. Tomorrow, this place wouldn't look the same. Diagnosis. Ego. Scene 1. God walks in. Or so he thinks at exactly 7:59 a.m. Dr. Raymond Hawley burst through the side entrance of Ridgeway Medical like a walking trademark. White coat swirling behind him, double espresso in one hand, and Bluetooth headset lodged permanently in one ear. Hawley looked like he just walked off the cover of a magazine titled Overpaid and Over It. The automatic doors didn't open fast enough for his liking. He scowled under his breath. Technology's great until it's not, he muttered to no one. But that didn't stop him from glancing at the mirrored wall beside the lobby and checking his teeth. Hawley lived for these moments. The daily procession through the building where the staff half greeted him and half avoided eye contact. Not out of reverence. Out of relief that he might keep walking and not stop to ask them a question disguised as an insult. Morning, doctor, said a trembling intern. He nodded. Non-committal, is it? Behind him, a janitor mopped quietly. Hawley stepped right onto the wet floor, tracking water past the reception desk. Slippery, he warned as he left. Thanks. The janitor said dryly. Scene 2. A patient without paperwork in exam room 2. Marcus Lemley, a mechanic in his early 50s with oil-stained hands and a cough that rattled his ribcage, sat shirtless and uncomfortable on a padded table. His breathing wheezed. Dr. Hawley walked in and barely glanced at him. Cough, chest tightness. No insurance. Work-related exposure. Hawley read off the clipboard like it was a grocery list. Okay, sounds like bronchitis. Take a few days off. Over-the-counter expectorants. You're good. Marcus blinked. No tests? Hawley gave him a tight smile. You're not dying. But you said you work at an auto shop, right? Breathing around solvents? Maybe switch to masks. Doctor, Marcus said, wincing. I think it might be more. I get dizzy too. Sometimes. Blackout. Hale's fake sympathy kicked in. And how long has that been happening? 2 months. And you came in now? I was saving up, Marcus said quietly. Hawley scribbled something and handed him a dismissive note. You can follow up at a free clinic if you like. We have real emergencies here. Scene 3. The observer takes note in the hallway outside. Keanu Ross leaned against the wall, unreadable as ever. He hadn't been eavesdropping. Not exactly. The walls were thin. And a sigh from Marcus Lemley as he stepped out of the exam room? That was the sound of a man who'd been treated like a burden, not a human. Kean approached Nurse Amara, who was scanning intake forms. Was that man just released? Kean asked quietly. Amara looked up, startled. Yes, he doesn't have insurance. And that's the criteria now? She hesitated. Unofficially, it doesn't help his case. His breathing sounded abnormal. She nodded. I thought so too. Can I ask? Kean leaned in, his tone soft but firm. What the hospital protocol is for uninsured patients? Technically, Amara replied, treat first, bill later. But Dr. Hawley doesn't like gray areas. He likes quick fixes. Kean looked back toward exam room 2. So do duct tapes. Doesn't make them doctors. Scene 4. The whispers of the good in the break room later. Amara sighed over her coffee. He didn't even listen to the fee. Guy's lungs, she told her colleague Raj, an orderly with a soft heart and a loud laugh. I mean, what's the point of all this if we're just deciding who deserves to be sick? Raj shook his head. You're preaching to the choir, Amara, but we all know Hale's untouchable. The board loves him. Brings in the fancy donors. Puts on a good show. Yeah, Amara muttered, and plays God with a stethoscope. Scene 5. The hidden dashboard. Kean returned to his seat beside Edna, still asleep, and opened his leather notebook. But this time, he also pulled out a small tablet. Custom interface. Retina scan unlock. Nothing commercial. It showed Ridgeway's real-time metrics. Average patient wait time, 53 minutes. Diagnostics error rate, 7.3%. Billing disputes, 312 unresolved. Charity cases denied treatment, 27 this quarter. Staff turnover, up 13%. He tapped through a few more screens. Behind the beautiful facade, the hospital's soul was leaking from 100 wounds. Scene 6, dollars over decency. Meanwhile, in the billing department, a woman named Cheryl was berating a junior staffer. No, we do not mention the charity fund unless they ask for it by name. Got it? It's hidden for a reason. But the woman has 3 kids in stage 2. Then she should have invested in insurance. I want full copay on file or bump her off the list. Outside the office, Kean stood listening. Again, quietly. He didn't burst in. He didn't yell. He just added another name to the list. And under it, he wrote, Cheryl. Prioritize ethics retraining or termination. Scene 7. Hale's sermon on the Mount at noon. Dr. Hawley gathered his department leads in the conference room. His PowerPoint was titled, Efficiency over empathy. The new Ridgway model. Yes, really. He clicked through slides showing revenue, growth, cost reductions, and something called patient churn optimization. A brave soul from pediatrics raised a hand. Sir, what about increasing time with patients to improve diagnosis? Holly waved it off. We're not their therapists. We're technicians with lab coats. Diagnostics, decisions done. The room was silent until Holly grinned and clapped. Relax, that's why I'm here. So you don't have to be. Scene 8. The door that wouldn't open later that day, Kean approached the office of the hospital administrator, a man named Dean Whitlock, well-groomed, polished, and perfectly complicit. I'd like to request a brief meeting, Kean said, politely. The assistant checked the calendar, frowned. I'm sorry, mister. Kean, I'm visiting a patient. No walk-ins. Mr. Whitlock is booked for the day. Kean nodded. Can you let him know I was here? Of course, she lied. Scene 9. An unlikely heroine exam room 5. A scared teenage girl named Lily waited with her grandmother. They didn't understand the paperwork. The tests they needed weren't approved. Kean, having overheard their struggle, walked quietly to Nurse Amara. Can we fast-track a screening for room 5? He asked. She raised an eyebrow. We'd need a physician sign-off. Send it under Dr. Mercer, Kean said. I cleared it. You have that authority? Not officially. But trust me. She paused, then nodded. Lily got her test. And Kean got a small nod of respect from Amara. Cliffhanger. The eyes are turning later. As Kean walked toward the elevators, speaking quietly with a board member who had just arrived, Dr. Hawley passed by. He slowed, watched, eyebrow raised. Who is that guy? He asked no one in particular. No one had an answer. But Hawley wasn't the kind of man who liked not knowing. The emergency wing, scene 1, red lights and sirens. It began like any other Tuesday. Slow coffee, predictable complaints, and hallway gossip. Until it wasn't. At 10:43 a.m., the sirens began. 1, then 2, then 5. The ambulances hit the EA driveway in a blur of flashing lights and screeching brakes. Multi-vehicle accident. 23 injured. Some critical. The automatic EI doors hissed open again and again, and the smell of diesel, blood, and antiseptic clashed like a chaotic perfume. Stretchers rolled in. Nurses shouted codes. A teenager with glass embedded in her face. A man missing. Half his sleeve and nearly his arm. A pregnant woman screaming. And the worst of them, a child, unconscious, head bandaged with makeshift gauze and a teddy bear still in his hand. The hospital, despite all its marble and reputation, was not ready. Scene 2, cracks in the marble. Where's the triage coordinator? Someone yelled. I think she's out on maternity leave. What do we do? I don't know. People scrambled. Phones rang. Monitors beeped. The waiting room became an extension of the E, and patients were being laid on the floor as gurneys filled up. Dr. Hall entered wearing his signature cologne and a new tie, looking like a man who'd wandered into the wrong genre of television. He paused at the door, took one long look at the mess, and blanched. What the hell is going on here? He barked. Mass trauma event, shouted a nurse. No warning. We're not equipped for this many criticals, said another. And Trauma B is under renovation. Hawley took a step back. This is a liability nightmare. Scene 3. The calm in the storm while everyone else shouted. Kean Ross stood up slowly from where he had been helping an elderly patient sit down. He took off his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and walked straight into the chaos like someone walking into their living room. Raj, he called to the orderly. Start clearing out waiting bay 2. Move mobile patients to the north hallway. On it, Raj said without a second thought. Amara, your point nurse. Assign a runner. To each trauma bay, we need relay reporting every 3 minutes. Got it, she replied, already scribbling assignments. Call the Midtown Clinic, Kean said to a security officer. Tell them Ridgeway is at capacity. Ask if they can take Category Yellow patients. The officer blinked. Who are you? Someone. Who's not waiting for permission? Scene 4. Hale unravels DR. Hale stormed into Trauma Bay A like a peacock with a migraine. Excuse me, he said, voice raised. Who exactly put you in charge? Kean glanced over. No one. Exactly. So kindly get out of my R. Happy to, Kean replied coolly. Right after everyone here is breathing on their own. You're giving medical orders. Hale snapped. I'm giving logistical instructions, Kean said. Because you're too busy panicking. Gasps from nearby staff. Hale stepped closer, his voice now ice. You think you can come in here? Act like a hero, and what? Play Grey's Anatomy for a day. Kean didn't blink. No, I'm just trying to make sure your ego doesn't kill anyone. Scene 5. Loyalty grows and crisis nurse Amara stood in front of Kean. He's right. Doctor. We're drowning, and he's the only one throwing us a lifeboat. Raj nodded too. Whatever his title is, he knows what he's doing. Hale looked around. For the first time, his usual armor of authority cracked. These people need a doctor, not a logistics consultant. They need both, Kean said, voice quiet. So be the doctor, or get out of the way. Scene 6. The underground network. Kean pulled out his private phone. One secure call later, he had a fleet of volunteer medics. From a nearby training center en route, he pinged a database and redirected 6 patients with non-life-threatening conditions to other facilities. Via ambulance. He wasn't doing this for show. He was doing this because somewhere in all this madness was a child, Scene 7, the teddy bear and the clock room 6, the smallest trauma room. The injured child lay pale, barely responsive. Skull fracture. Internal bleeding suspected. Prep. For surgery, the nurse called out. No surgeon available, came the voice from across the room. Dr. Hale appeared. That's high risk without full diagnostics. I'm not opening up a kid without paperwork and consent. He'll be dead in 30 minutes, the nurse shouted. Not my call, Hale snapped. We'll transfer him out if we must. Transfer. Takes an hour, Amara yelled. Kean walked in. His eyes fell on the child's teddy bear, still clutched tight. Who's on pediatric surgical rotation? He asked. Dr. Hale replied, Me. Then operate. I said no. There's liability. There's risk. There's Kean cut him off. Then I authorize it. You what? I authorize it as the majority shareholder of Ridgeway Medical. Silence. Pure, thick silence. Amara's pen fell to the floor. Scene 8. The quiet power hale stared at him. You. You're the donor? Kean didn't answer. Just looked. At the child. Operate now. It was no longer a request. Scene 9. Public meltdown. An hour later, the child was stable. The surgery successful. Staff milled around, whispers flying. Who was this man? Kean stood by the nurse's station when Hale approached, face flushed, voice shaking. You have no right to do what you just did, he growled. No, Kean said softly. But I had the responsibility. Hale jabbed a finger at his chest. Who do you think you are? Kean looked up. The quiet storm in his eyes brewing at last. You'll find out soon enough. Revealed. Scene 1. Whispers in the halls. The hospital was unusually quiet the next morning. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that hangs heavy in the air like fog before a storm. Nurses, orderlies, interns, everyone was whispering. Did you see him yesterday? The guy with the brown coat? Took over the R like he owned the place. Well, apparently. He does. At the front desk, a new intern asked, "Wait, you mean that guy's like a real doctor?" Raj, the orderly, chuckled softly. "Nah, kid. He's something rarer than that. A decent man. With actual power." In the administrative wing, the murmurs turned into ripples that lapped against a very uncomfortable Dr. Raymond Hawley. Scene 2? The complaint of the year. "I want him barred from this hospital." Hawley exploded, slamming his fist onto a desk. So hard the receptionist flinched. Unauthorized personnel. Unauthorized decisions. He nearly got a child killed. The HR officer cleared her throat. "Actually, Dr. Hawley, the child's vitals stabilized following the emergency procedure. He's been moved to recovery. Parents are thankful. That's not the point." Hawley snapped, face turning a shade of legal crimson. "The man is a liability. I'm filing a formal complaint." He stormed out, muttering something about lawsuits and reputations. If Hawley had looked over his shoulder, he would have seen Keanu sitting calmly in a corner of the same office, silently filling out a patient satisfaction survey. He even rated the hospital's coffee. 2 stars, Scene 3. A meeting is called an hour later. Ridgeway's board of directors held an emergency session. The agenda was vague. Operational interference and hospital chain of command review. The tone was not. Dean Whitlock, the hospital administrator, wore his usual pasted-on professionalism. "We've had some irregularities," he said, "and a man whose identity and role in this institution have come into question." "Irregularities?" one board member scoffed. "The guy saved half a dozen patients yesterday." Another, more cautious voice replied, "He also bypassed protocol, accessed restricted systems, and gave medical direction without certification." "Sounds like someone who knows how this place runs," someone muttered. Whitlock cleared his throat. "We've asked Mr. Ross to join us today to clarify his presence." The room shifted. Pens clicked. Phone silenced. The air was ready. Scene 4. Enter the Lion at exactly 9 a.m. The door opened. No fanfare. No entourage. Just Keanu Ross in that same plain brown coat, walking into the boardroom like he was arriving for a dentist appointment. He took the empty seat at the head of the table. Dean Whitlock frowned. "That's reserved for the chairman," Keanu nodded. "I know." Silence. Scene 5. Identity, declared. Keanu leaned forward, placed a worn leather notebook on the polished mahogany, and looked around the room with the calm of someone who already knew how this would end. "My name," he said softly, "is Keanu Everett Ross. I'm the founder of Ross Trust Holdings, the primary equity partner of Ridgeway Medical Group." A pause. "I own 72% of this hospital, including its land, assets, tech infrastructure, and personnel contracts. Most of you were hired under my review." A longer pause. "I've been observing for the past 4 months under direct non-disclosure protocol, monitoring patient experiences, staff behavior, and systemic integrity." You could have heard a syringe drop. Scene 6. Reactions. Raw. Dean Whitlock's face went from resting smug to "I just sat on a cactus." A board member coughed into her hand. Another one crossed himself. But the best reaction? Dr. Hawley, who had arrived late, bursting through the door mid-sentence. "I demand a say in this. This is a circus." He froze, looked at Keanu. "You?" Keanu turned, expression unreadable. "Good morning, Dr. Hawley." "You set me up," Hawley spat. "You let me humiliate you." Keanu stood slowly. "No, Raymond, you did that all by yourself." Scene 7. The Ledger of Truth. Keanu opened his notebook. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, spreadsheets, audio clips, patient surveys, anonymized staff testimonials. Misdiagnosis. Rates up 9%. Billing irregularities in 23% of low-income cases. 2 near-fatal incidents due to skipped screenings. Charity fund access deliberately obscured. He looked at the room. This is the hospital I inherited. It's not the one I envisioned. A murmur rippled across the board. This institution has been coasting on reputation while compromising lives. And you all let it happen. Scene 8. The ultimatum. I'm giving you a choice. Keanu said. Either we begin systemic reform with transparency, patient-first policies, and ethical oversight. Or I begin replacing this board one by one. No one moved. No one blinked. And make no mistake, Keanu continued, I have the resources, the data, and the moral obligation to do it. He turned to Dean Whitlock. Your quarterly bonuses will now be linked to patient outcomes, to the board. Charity care will be restored, fully funded, to everyone. The age of profit over people is over. At Ridgeway. People matter again. Scene 9. Final Standhill stood, shaking with anger. You Candace, walked in here like some saint. You're just a businessman playing dress-up, Keanu tilted his head. I'm a businessman who cares. That makes me dangerous to people like you. You could have warned me, Halle said bitterly. You could have spared me the embarrassment. I gave you every chance to act like a decent human, Keanu said. You refused. Halle clenched his fists. You set me up ... Keanu stared back, calm and deliberate. No, Dr. Halle. You set yourself up the day you forgot this was a hospital, not your stage. The heart of the hospital, scene 1, 7 days later 1 week. That's how long it took for Ridgeway to start feeling like a different place. No new building was raised. No big press releases. No balloons or banners. But something had shifted. The front desk now greeted patients by name, not number. Waiting times dropped. Not because of more staff, but because the system flowed better. Because people cared. Someone even fixed the water fountain. In the staff lounge, where laughter had once been a rare and endangered species, jokes floated freely over lukewarm coffee. The hospital, once polished on the outside and poisoned within, was learning to beat again. Scene 2. The man who had no crowd. Dear Halle noticed the changes. That was unavoidable. What he also noticed. No one made eye contact anymore. Where once nurses scrambled to impress or avoid his wrath, now they simply passed him by. Cordial, polite, distant. He walked into the break room and conversation stopped. Not out of respect, out of discomfort. He'd gone from feared to forgotten in under a week. And yet, something strange happened. He didn't lash out, he watched. A nurse wrapped a blanket around a shivering teen in the waiting area. An intern stopped mid-chart to explain a diagnosis to a confused patient. This wasn't rebellion. It was something stronger. It was culture. Scene 3. The rise of Amara. Nurse Amara was no longer just a nurse. Now her badge read Director of Patient Care Initiatives. Keanu had promoted her without ceremony and plenty of backing data. Her empathy, her performance, her leadership. But it was how she wore the role that mattered. She used it not to command, but to uplift. She mentored other nurses, introduced a daily debrief to catch what patients weren't saying aloud, created a gratitude wall where patients and families could leave notes. The first read, to Nurse Amara, you smiled when no one else would. She cried when she saw it, quietly. In a stairwell, scene 4, Keanu. The ghost in the machine. Keanu remained in the background, but his fingerprints were everywhere. The billing department now used transparent statements, readable even by someone without a medical degree or lawyer on speed dial. He deployed tablets with voice-recorded instructions for elderly patients who struggled with paperwork. Patient feedback was now mandatory, not optional. He didn't preach or micromanage or even stay late. He let the heart grow strong on its own. That was the plan. Scene 5. The mirror cracks. One evening, Hale sat alone in his office, flipping through a dusty old file of his first surgery. He'd been 27, fresh-eyed, terrified, full of purpose. A scribbled note from a mother of twins he saved was still tucked in the file. "Thank you, Dr. Hale. You didn't just save her life, you saved mine." His hand hovered over it for a long while. He whispered aloud, "Where the hell did I go?" The walls didn't answer, but the question echoed. Scene 6. Instinct over ego. Lobby was chaos again, but for a different reason. A man collapsed near the entrance. Heart attack. No staff immediately nearby. Hale, halfway out the door, saw the scene. He didn't hesitate, dropped his briefcase, rushed over. Call code blue. He knelt down, performed chest compressions, barked clear instructions like a conductor in a life-and-death symphony. By the time the crash team arrived, the man had a pulse. The crowd clapped. But Hale didn't bask. He just stood, nodded, and walked away. Scene 7. The offer. Later that evening, Keanu found him in the stairwell. "You stayed," Keanu said softly. Hale didn't look up. "Habit. You saved someone today." Reflex. There was silence for a beat. "I was wrong," Hale said, voice quieter than Keanu had ever heard it. Keanu nodded. "You were." Another beat. "But you don't have to stay wrong." Hale looked at him then. "Why give me a second chance?" Keanu shrugged. "Because people deserve the chance to be better, even when they forget they want it." Scene 8. Small apologies, big impact. Hale didn't hold a press conference. He didn't tweet. But he did something rarer. He walked into the nurses' lounge, hands in pockets, head slightly bowed. "Amara," he said. "Raj, everyone, I was wrong. About a lot, I'm sorry." A silence followed. Then Amara stood. "You've got a long way to go, doctor." "I know, but this ... is a decent start." They nodded. That was all he asked for. Scene 9. A new kind of dawn. He started arriving early. Not to bark orders, to observe. He asked interns about their cases. He corrected without condescension. He made coffee once, burned it, blamed the machine. People laughed with him. This time. Change didn't come in a parade. It came in glances, shared smiles, and the slow thawing of years of ice. Even the vending machine started working again. Cliffhanger. The exit in the rooftop garden. Keanu stood one morning with Amara and Hale. He looked out over the city, eyes soft. "I'm stepping down," he said. Both turned to him. "What?" Amara asked. "I came to see if this place still had a heart. And now ... I hear it beating again." "But you built this," Hale said. "No," Keanu said. "You all did. I just reminded it how." Legacy and silence. Scene 1. 1 year later, a new pulse. Ridgeway Medical Center of today didn't look like the Ridgeway of a year ago. Sure, the walls were the same off-white, the hallways still buzzed with the squeaky wheels of gurneys, and the coffee still had no business being called coffee. But the feeling? That was different. It was in the way receptionists said, "We're so glad you're here." Not, "What's your insurance?" It was in the volunteers who offered warm blankets before anyone asked. It was in the laughter of pediatric patients, echoing through halls that had once been filled with sterile silence. This wasn't just a Fatzen hospital anymore. It was a place of healing. Scene 2. The torchbearer in the newly renovated staff training auditorium. Nurse Amara stood before a group of nervous new hires. Her badge now read chief of patient advocacy, was the quiet head-down nurse who once worked through lunch. In her place stood a confident leader with a smile that said, "You're going to do more good than you know." "Here's what you need to remember," she said. "People don't come here just for medicine. They come here for hope, for dignity, for someone to believe them, even when they're scared." A young nurse raised a hand. "Was it always like this?" Amara smiled. "No, but someone reminded us how it could be." Scene 3. Redemption in Practice DR. Raymond Halley now wore scrubs most weekends. Not for show, for service. He ran a Saturday morning clinic for underinsured families. No press, no camera flashes. Just him, a couple med students, and a thermos of coffee. He'd listen. Actually, listen. And never rushed out. One mother handed him a cookie and said, "You're not like other doctors." He smiled. "You should have seen me a year ago." They all laughed, except the med student beside him, who blinked in confusion. "That was a joke, right?" "Mostly," Holly replied, sipping his coffee like a man grateful for second chances. Scene 4. The man they never fully saw. Stories floated through the hospital like folklore. He came in wearing a brown coat. Didn't raise his voice. Once. Changed the whole system. Never even asked for credit. His name appeared in very few official documents, and none of the public ones. To many. Keanu Ross had become a myth. To those who knew better, he was simply a reminder. That quiet power is the hardest to corrupt. Scene 5. The Wall of Thanks. A young nurse walked a new intern past the gratitude wall. Over 100 handwritten notes, photos, and drawings had been pinned up. "Thank you for helping my dad walk again. Nurse Amara is a superhero." To the man in the brown coat, "You changed everything." Some notes were wrinkled. Others laminated. One was written in crayon and said simply, "This place made me feel like I matter." The intern blinked back tears. "That's why we're here," the nurse said. "That's the real medicine." Scene 6. A walk worth waiting for. Edna Forrester, the woman whose failing health had sparked Keanu's return, now walked those halls herself. No oxygen tank. No wheelchair. She wore soft sneakers and a cardigan. With a daisy pin, staff greeted her like family. She always brought cookies. Sometimes she forgot the cookies but was forgiven instantly. She didn't know how much of this change she'd inspired, and she didn't need to. She just felt safe here now. And that was enough. Scene 7. A ghost returns. Keanu Ross returned on a cloudy Thursday afternoon. No coat. No fanfare. He walked through Ridgeway's halls like a man visiting an old house that no longer needed him to keep the lights on. He paused by the pediatric wing, left a stack of books at the front desk, and stepped into the common area just as a child fell while running. Keanu knelt down, helped the boy up. "You okay?" he asked gently. The boy sniffled, nodded, then tilted his head. "You're not a doctor." "No," Keanu said, smiling. "Just someone who cares." The boy grinned. "That's better." Scene 8. The quiet goodbye. Keanu left Ridgeway the same way he arrived, quietly. No announcements. No ribbon cutting. He stepped out into the soft drizzle of the afternoon, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the city like a man satisfied with his silence. Inside, Nurse Amara found a sealed envelope on her desk. It read, "No monuments, no statues. Just take care of each other. With gratitude, Kay." Scene 9. The wall that speaks for him. A week later, a new plaque was installed in the lobby, right beneath the hospital's mission statement. It didn't list donors or founders. It didn't have gold trim. It simply said, "In honor of the quiet ones, the listeners, the believers, the change makers, the ones who never needed to shout to be heard." Closing line. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that never needed to shout. The end.